I would have to assess that as far as the Russia-Ukraine situation has gone, it has been a really gross miscalculation by the Russians and Vladimir Putin, obviously in particular, as to the timetable, the objectives that they would achieve, and the reaction against that. Militarily, this was an operation that I would think they thought would be over in a week, and it's gone way beyond that, and it's somewhat bogged down now. The reaction of the world to this was grossly underestimated. There's never been sanctions like the ones that have been placed on Russia, and there's a unity among nations that is really unparalleled in terms of the imposition of those sanctions. It also, too, has resulted in something that I know that he didn't want, which is a stronger, really reinvigorated NATO. Now, at the same time, let's not kid ourselves. The tremendous death and destruction have been wrought in Ukraine as a result of this operation, and continues to be wrought. However, the Ukrainians, in addition to fighting essentially to a standstill so far, have also waged a tremendous information war with a sophistication that I think has surprised many. So that really, if we're looking at the winning the hearts and minds of the world, the Ukrainians have certainly succeeded in doing that. This event is another line that divides history that people will point to. Just as people will talk about the end of World War II in the late 40s and the beginning of the Cold War, they will look at this time and they will say this was an event that was the line between what had come before and what comes after. And it's a new world is the part of the point that I would make. What you find yourself in is unknown territory now. It's not governed by the same things that, the same considerations that were before, of the sort of end of the Cold War era that extended before this, when it was supposed that there would be general peace in Europe and integration of economies, codependency, working together, definitely still, tensions, but not flaring into open war. Now we have, for the first time since World War II, a sovereign country invading another sovereign country on the European continent. And we're not talking about small principalities here. We're talking about the two largest land, in terms of land mass, countries in Europe. So this is a tremendous tectonic shift that's taken place on the European continent. NATO, how does it react against this, and where are the lines drawn? Possibly new member states who've already been partners. For example, Finland's already been a partner with NATO, but not a NATO country. Will that result in an expanded NATO alliance? Again, something that Vladimir Putin certainly didn't want. We're now dealing with nuclear weapons again. What happens when we're brought into open conflict with a country that has nuclear weapons? How do you navigate that? Diplomacy. Is there space for diplomacy? And I think one of the things that we worry about in this situation is, what are the off-ramps? Are there places that we can go? Are there deals to be made that will somehow de-escalate the situation and return us not necessarily to status quo antebellum, but at least would get us to a point where there's a way forward? That way forward has not emerged yet. And one of the scary things about this situation is it looks like we've still got a ways to go as this thing unfolds before we get to a point that perhaps there's some give and take and show that, okay, we're seeing some sort of a diplomatic off-ramp. At the same time, that doesn't mean diplomacy doesn't continue. Diplomacy should always continue no matter how bad the situation may seem. You've got to keep talking. This is a very difficult situation as you look at it, because Remember, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We have treaty obligations to all the countries of NATO. It's a collective security agreement. It's a collective security organization. Attack upon one is attack upon all. Article 5 declaration. In that case, it would be simple if this were a NATO country and there were attack on a NATO country. This is not a NATO country. Certainly, it's a country that we've been friendly with and that we support, and we are supporting in the current situation. Some who would say, well, what about North Korea, South Korea? If North Korea attacks South Korea, we'll go, well, yes, we have a treaty obligation to South Korea. We've already made that commitment. We don't have that treaty obligation in this particular case. So it's a very delicate situation in terms of, yes, we want to support, and we are supporting, and NATO in general is supporting. We have been supporting and getting in weapons and logistics and other things and providing support as we can. One has to be careful as you think about escalation and, okay, how far are we willing to go on this? And what does that mean? To go into open conflict with, potentially American troops if we were unilateral, which I doubt we would do anything unilaterally in this case. More in the context of NATO. NATO now beginning an offensive operation with troops in contact against the Russians. It's kind of an unprecedented situation. One of the things about getting old in the military, though, is I still have some friends who are active in the military, and I'm reassured because one of my friends with whom I flew F-15s in Bitburg, Germany in the late 80s when we were both captains, and our career paths crossed numerous times over the years, is now General Todd Walters, Supreme Allied Commander Europe. And I have every confidence in General Walters' leadership, and I feel very comforted to know that he's in the chair as the Supreme Allied Commander Europe during this kind of crisis. But it's not going to be easy for anyone to navigate, or any country to navigate. And so this is, we say in the military, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Well, the situation is always dynamic, and it changes, and constantly adapting to it. History can be a guide in some cases, but history does not actually repeat itself in exactly the same circumstance. There are always subtle differences. There are always unique qualities of situations that demand unique responses. And we're still figuring this one out. But I've been impressed with all the parties involved in terms of the response. Let's be realistic here. This has been an unprecedented response. There have never been sanctions leveled on a country on this scale. There's rarely been this kind of unity among the majority of countries, far more majority of the countries in the world, as condemning this kind of action. So it's a difficult situation that we're going to continue to have to navigate and to come up with creative solutions for. But I'm proud of what the response has been. The difficulty we tend to have sometimes in democracies, though, is sometimes sustaining. And so we really have to, in my mind, we have to be clear about what our objectives are. We have to be clear that we are going to stay in this for the long game, and we are not going to be outlasted by Vladimir Putin.